Cub Swanson versus Daniel Pineda. We got minus 145 on the Pit Pineda and plus 125 on Cub Swanson. The over-under is set at 2.5, with the over being minus 145 currently. Let's start off with Cub Swanson, who's coming off a bit of a layoff now. Last time we saw him in the cage was actually October of last year at the UFC Tampa card, where he beat Kron Gracie via decision. But before that, he had fallen on hard times, 4 straight losses. Now, normally that usually means, usually 3 fights. If you lose 3 straight fights, that normally means the end of your UFC career. But he's made a name for himself in the UFC. It seems like, Dana and the brass is usually definitely going to be behind him here. Even if he loses, he's a bit of a name. He's entertaining as a fighter. So I think most people are pretty happy to still see him around. I think if he lost the Kron Gracie fight, that probably might have been a little bit different, but he did end up getting the victory there, and now he still keeps his job alive. And now here he is against Daniel Pineda, who probably a tougher test than Kron Gracie was, to be honest. So we know Cub Swanson's style. He prefers to be on the feet. He moves very well, has a diverse set of skills when it comes to the striking realm. Kicks very well, punches very well, moves very well. His downfall recently has seemed to be the ground game. When fighters are able to get him to the ground and really do some solid work from on top, they could either get the finish via choke, via ground and pound, but more often than not, considering that Cub Swanson is a black belt, it's kind of it's weird to see him get tapped as often as he is. That's why a lot of people were high on Kron Gracie to be able to get Cub Swanson to the ground and pull off that type of victory. But Gracie's wrestling game is really just not there yet, and that's where I think that Daniel Pineda definitely exceeds more than Kron Gracie, which is why I believe he's the rightful favorite in this fight. I did have a big bet on Cub Swanson against Brian Ortega, as I believed his footwork and his his striking would be able to kind of piece up Brian and keep the fight on the feet. However, Brian just did a really good job of just jumping guillotine. Swanson looked great in that first round, and then in the second round, he allowed Ortega to clinch up a little bit too much. Eventually, jumped for that guillotine choke, adjusted in midair as well, and then eventually got the finish. So big win for Ortega in that fight, and that started off the 4-fight losing streak for Cub Swanson. He loses to Frankie Edgar, who attempted 8 takedowns, didn't complete any of them, but I think that's more so of a case of just Edgar not really being in the shape and the form of his former self where he was able to go out there and get takedowns. Like the first time he faced Cub Swanson, Frankie Edgar was able to complete 7 takedowns. So let's see how many takedowns he actually went for in that fight. He went 7 of 13, so just over 50% in that fight, and then went 0 of 8 in the next fight, but was still able to kind of outstrike Cub Swanson on the feet to get the decision victory there. Then we saw Moicano land a beautiful drop Swanson, and he followed that up with the takedown, and then eventually got the back and got the rear naked choke. And then the Shane Burgos fight, kind of close, mainly contested on the feet. We didn't see Burgos shoot for any takedowns, but Burgos still ends up pulling out the victory there. Now here with Pineda, we know what Pineda's game is. He likes getting the fight to the ground. He likes implementing that top pressure and going for submissions of his own. So I think that's the type of game plan we'll see him go out there and implement against Cub Swanson. Let's not overlook Pineda's return to the UFC, coming back to the UFC last time around and beat Herbert Burns as a heavy underdog. I'm so happy to have hit that play on my own. But Pineda came in roughly as a plus 230, plus 240 underdog against Herbert Burns and finishes him in the second round. Pressure from the get-go, and it eventually broke Herbert Burns, who had some good positions on the ground. As a solid black belt, Herbert Burns just wasn't able to get the submission against Pineda. Now, I think Pineda, if he gets Cub Swanson to the ground, he's going to have a lot of success. I think he's going to beat him up from on top. I think he has a really good chance to, hold his own on the feet, but I think he'll be very successful in kind of pushing Cub Swanson up against the cage. Again, I don't like to harp harp on it too much, but the smaller cage does really entice action a little bit more than normal. So I think he's going to be able to push Cub Swanson up against the cage, drag this fight to the ground, and really get his top game going, just as we saw in the Herbert Burns fight, and even in his run up back to the UFC. He's really used his wrestling and his ground and pound to very full effect, and even get a couple of submission victories in there as well. Now, I tried to make this case last time around in terms of when I was breaking down his fight with Herbert Burns, but you could make a case that Daniel Pineda is 11-0 coming into the UFC. Well, 12-0 if you want to take this Herbert Burns fight into consideration. But we had the Emmanuel Sanchez fight that was a split decision. Apparently it could have gone either way, so let's just say in a hypothetical world that he got that decision victory. Then the Georgie Karakhanyan fight, he was whooping on Karakhanyan for a solid 9 minutes before Karakhanyan definitely or finally hit like an up kick that cut Pineda. Probably the only and best strike that Karakhanyan landed in that fight. Cuts open Pineda, probably like not even the worst cut we've ever seen either. It's like a cut that a lot of doctors, in my opinion, probably would have let continue going, and Pineda could have easily, locked up another victory there. So that could have been a victory for him, and that's what I'm talking about. And then he has those 2-0 contests where he won 2 fights in one night, one against Movled Kaibuliev and Jeremy Kennedy. Those fights get turned to a no contest because apparently he popped for all the steroids, which I find hilarious that they eventually signed him to the UFC even after that. Clearly, they didn't care about that. So, yeah, good for him. Gets back into the UFC. I'm not sure if he got a performance of the night bonus. Yeah, he did get a performance of the night. So, great victory to come back to, and a ton of money to come back to as well. So, solid win for him there. Now, 4 months later, he's stepping back into the cage against the UFC vet in Cub Swanson. And I think he takes this fight. Like, his stand up isn't horrible. I think he, Cub Swanson, 37 years old, been off for a year now, just turned 37 in November. Daniel Pineda is 35 himself too, but he still looks to be in prime tip-top condition, and he seems to have a type of game plan and strategy that he goes into his fights with that is a nightmare for Cub Swanson. So as long as Pineda doesn't really get knocked out on the feet or anything like that, I definitely think that he'll get Swanson on the ground and really do some damage, whether it's lock up a choke or even just finish this fight via ground and pound. So the spot that I like the most, so I do like Pineda, minus 145, maybe not so much. I think that's a little bit steep, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of money come in on Swanson, as I do think that, like I've heard from a couple people that they believe he is live. After running the tape and doing the research myself, I no longer believe that, because that's something that I did believe going into the tape here, but I don't think he's as live as I initially thought. The spot that I'm going to be looking at the most, though, is the under 2.5, and we are seeing a little bit of money come in on that, so it is pushing the number down. It opened at plus 125, now it's at plus 115, so I don't really know where that line's going to go. So we'll see when the limits open up a little bit more, and then if it's still at plus money, that might be a spot that I look to hit here. But I do think it's going to be a Daniel Pineda fight, consistently taking down Cub Swanson, doing damage on top, staying out of any type of submission threat that Cub Swanson may have with his black belt. I truly believe that Herbert Burns is a much better black belt than him, and he had Pineda in some really sticky situations, and we saw Pineda get out of it. So I think if he's able to defend against Herbert Burns, he'll be able to defend here against Cub Swanson and do some solid work from on top. So I'm taking Pineda via finish, probably second round, whether it's TKO, submission, whatever it is. I truly think that he'll be able to get Swanson down time and time again and get that damage in. So once again, I'll go with Daniel Pineda to win this fight inside the distance. Probably second round is the spot that I'm looking at.